What's going on, ladies and gents? Thank you so much for clicking onto this interview. I hope you guys love it. It's with my mate, Caleb Skelly, all the way in Arizona. Now, just filming this to let you guys know that before you watch the interview, there are a couple of cuts. That's got nothing to do with our conversation, but everything to do with technical difficulties. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk soon. Caleb, my man, thank you so much for
Hey,
doing this, brother.
yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been a while, so I'm glad to catch up, spend some time.
Man, how long has it been? 2, 3 years now?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was 2019, so about 2 years now.
Hey, lots gone down in 2 years, eh?
Yeah, yeah, lots going on. Got a baby, a 1 year old now. It's COVID's happened. There's been a lot going on. Yeah,
How
my
is the
sister's in Australia now too.
Yeah, mate. We stole it from you guys, man.
Yeah, it's all right. You can have her.
How is the COVID situation over there? You guys still got procedures and all that, or you guys pretty much back to normal?
No, we're pretty much back to normal. Been like that for a few months. Some states are starting to reverse a little bit, or I guess I should say more so counties and cities, like out in California and things up northwest and Seattle and places like that. But here in Arizona, it's pretty lax, and everybody's just kind of dealing with it the way they feel is most comfortable. So
Yeah, nice. Well, welcome to Talk to Me, man. Welcome to Talk to Me, ladies and gents, the show where I get my friends to talk to me. Today, I have Caleb Skelly. Now, Caleb and I met a couple of years back when he came to visit Australia, but I've known his dad and his family for a bit longer than that. Caleb, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are. Tell us what you do.
yeah. So as he said, my name is Caleb. So I met Ray and everybody 2 years ago. My wife Cassandra and I went along to with my dad to you guys' singles conference, and obviously we weren't single, but we saw an excuse to go to Australia and hang out, meet some new people. So that's how we met everybody. My dad, like you said, is Kurt Skelly, so well, preacher's kid and everything like that. But yeah, no, just glad to be able to call you my friend. And right now, I am a student ministries and outreach pastor in Buckeye, Arizona. So it's like 30 minutes west of Phoenix, and it's super hot where we're at. We're in the middle of the desert, but that's where God has us.
And how'd you guys get to Arizona, man? What led to you guys going there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of a crazy process. It was about a 2 year process. So right around the time that we met back in 2019, we started transitioning out of what we were doing. So I was an athletic director and PE teacher, Bible teacher, and a lot of other random things at Christian school. I just knew that Christian school wasn't long term what God had for
Mhm.
me, and I didn't want to feel like I was trapped in that system, per se. So I kind of branched out and just started trusting God, see what He'd have for us. And He actually led me to the corporate world for about a year and a half. And then we were always pursuing that next ministry position. So through a series of posts and things we put out there, just letting people know that we're looking. We were connected through Desert Hills, so Pastor Adam mutually knew my dad. They both went to the same college back in the day. So it kind of sparked a little conversation, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Nice, man. How long did that process take from, I guess,
hmm
knowing you needed to move on from the Christian school
Yeah.
world to Desert Hills?
Yeah, that was just about a little over 2 years to the date. So it
Okay.
was springtime of 2019. Sorry
Mm.
about that.
No, you're all right. So yeah, you took it. You started from the whole Christian school area, and you
Yeah.
started making moves. Took about 2 years.
Right. Yeah. So it was that spring as we were planning. The school was asking all the teachers' intentions and for next school year, and that's kind of when we made it known to them that we're thinking about moving on. And so that process took a little bit over 2 years. So it was end of February, I believe.
Okay.
of this year that we talked to Desert Hills First Contact.
Okay. So it's been about a 2.5 at the moment then altogether.
Yeah.
Far out.
Yep. Yeah. Long
How's that?
time.
How's that go mentally for you? Like, you've got a family to provide for. You're thinking about your family's future, and also thinking about a place to live because you're moving
Yeah.
away from like that's a very
Right.
different thing for Australians and Americans. Like Americans are very you guys move around a lot, but we're
We
very
do.
rooted, you know.
Uh-huh.
It's a
Yeah.
massive decision to go to another state. How's your like how are you thinking about it? What's going on in your head? Are you doubting God in any way because it's taking so long or
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah, I would say mentally in the back of my mind, I always knew that God would open doors. I knew that the ministry is what I was called to. I knew that's what God had for me. So I knew that there was going to be an opportunity that presented itself.
Mhm.
I knew that that was coming. That's not to say at times I was impatient or sometimes I felt like, God, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
or, even at one point I was like, am I even called to ministry? Uh, but anytime I wrestled with that, God kind of just confirmed that fact that no, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Just be patient. So it's tough sometimes, and mentally in that state, and that's where you can't just let your feelings control you of your feelings of feeling in discontent or impatient and let that just lead you to make impulsive decisions. You
Mhm.
have to know what God has taught you, know what God has affirmed previously, and let that rule. Because if you just follow that emotion, it's just up and down every day, each church that calls, so I think it was just mentally just attaching my thought process back to that decision of, hey, this is what God has called me to. He's going to see me through it, and every door that closes along the way, uh, we know that we're just going to do what we're supposed to do, and if it closes, that means God says something better, or this is not what God has for us. So in the meantime, you just have to take the blows as they come and understand that God puts us on a journey for a reason.
Mm.
And my perspective should be, what is God teaching me through this? Not as much, why would you do that to me, God? But God, you're putting me through this, and what are you teaching me through the moment? So,
Yeah, because that's a struggle, man. That
mhm.
I've always said that anytime I'm not in work or I'm looking for a job, that's always the biggest stress out for me. So to
Yeah.
have patience and just wait on the Lord's timing for that, that's it's a hard thing, but it's necessary for sure. When were you called? When did you get that call and that you knew that that was God's decision for your life?
Yeah, that was actually pretty early on. So I was always traveling with my dad. He spoke at camps and conferences all the time. So
Mhm.
I would go pretty much everywhere with him. Then I believe I was 10 or 11 years old. I had gone to a Christian camp that he had frequented before. And it's a camp that I'd go to a bunch of times as a high schooler. And it was a message where he started preaching and was kind of talking about serving God with your life, and
Mhm.
it was a call to full-time Christian service or surrendering, dedicating your life to the Lord, that whole theme to the message. And I just remember as a little kid sitting in the back, and I felt that God was tugging my heart, and I was a little bit nervous and apprehensive to make the decision because, obviously I know the devil was fighting that, and I was nervous because it's a teen service and what do I do? But it was just apparent that God was trying to get a hold of my life, and at that time, that's when I surrendered to the call to preach. That's not to say at times I kind of try to do my own thing or maybe question that, but I know anytime I went back in my mind's eye, I couldn't argue with that truth that I knew that God called me to the ministry.
That's interesting, bro. Especially at 10
Yeah.
years old, man. Like that's early.
Yeah.
That's
It
early.
is. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it's important as Christians we never disesteem the decisions children make.
100%.
Sometimes it's people can look at it and say, "Well, that's cute. Oh, that's nice. Oh,
It's
that's so
just a kid.
sweet." Right. Yeah. But you think kids have that faith that we as adults so many times need. And that's not to say that we shouldn't be careful about the decisions they make and make sure we talk through those things with them, make sure they understand, especially when it comes to salvation. But never, we should never disassume. We should always look to affirm whatever God is trying to do in
Yeah, 100%. I always say kids are smarter than adults, and they're a
their lives.
lot less jaded
Yeah.
than we are.
Right.
But it's awesome to see what God does in, excuse me, what God does in a kid's life and seeing that play out. How's that play out through high school for you and middle school?
Mm.
So you go through middle school knowing this is your calling, this is your thing, and you go through high school the same way. It's not a normal thing to go into ministry, especially in the
Mhm.
school realm. How does that how do you go through those two institutions knowing that's your end goal?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was a little different for me. I was blessed to grow up in a Christian school. So after that decision was made, um, I knew that's what I needed to start preparing for. So my dad and my youth pastor and a lot of people around me started to invest in me more. So I remember I was 12 years old was the first time we did a teen takeover
Okay.
at our church, basically where the teens ran the whole service.
Yep.
So I was one of the two slotted preachers for the night. So that was my first message in front of a church. Was 12 years old. And I preached on the man who marveled the master. It was about the centurion and his faith, and how Christ was taken back at it. And so throughout high school and middle school, had a lot of opportunities just to jump in. Started uh, running a bus route, heading that up, preaching at teen takeovers, preaching at nursing homes, and doing all those types of things. So middle school and high school, I was fortunate enough to be in an environment that nurtured that developed that. Uh, but just like anybody else, once I got to that end of high school, we started really questioning a lot of things as to, am I
100%.
sure this is what I want to do? Did I really make that decision? And the devil fights so hard because he knows when people are get to that stage in your most formative years, you're going to make those big foundational decisions about your life. He just tries to plant a lot of seeds of doubt. And
Mm.
for a little bit, I started trying to think maybe I'll do something else. Maybe I'll go into history. I like history. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
go into sports. I love sports. So I had about like a year and a half time frame where I kind of just try to feel it out for myself and see what I wanted to do. But I could never escape that truth of knowing what I was supposed to do. So yeah, I mean, my middle school and high school were pretty formative for me and laying foundation for what I was going to do. And then I just had that little bit of time where I was a little bit confused about what I was going to do. But I think trying something else reaffirmed that that's not what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You're supposed to do this thing. And I found that ministry was the one thing I couldn't live without. It was the one thing I had to do, and I knew that was a passion God put in my heart.
It's funny you say that because I went through a similar sort of circumstance. My dad
Yeah.
always knew I was meant for ministry. He just
Hmm.
knew it. He knew that that was God's calling for my life, but I tried to fight that. I told him,
Yeah.
I just want to go, just do a normal job, be a normal guy, go to church, just do the normal stuff. And
Hmm.
God gave me that for a year and a half.
Hmm.
Worst year and a half of my life. I absolutely hated it. And it wasn't until
Miserable all the time.
man, and it was funny because I remember arguing with God at night saying, this is exactly what I wanted. Why am I not happy? I
Mm.
was doing like I was still in ministry. I was still attending church exactly how I wanted to. I just wasn't doing it the way he wanted me to. And then I remember the day I quit and I said, all right, fine, I'm in, let's do it. And it was like a massive load just fell off. And I was
Mm.
like, okay, now I know what life is. And it's a lot different to what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
How did you find for anyone now, any teenager now going through those high school years, how important is it for them to get started in ministry whether it be for full-time ministry service in the future or just their standard ministry service as a church attendee?
Oh yeah, no, that's a great question. It's imperative. I think it's the utmost importance for you at an early age to develop that lifestyle. It's been said in the past. A lot of times, people use the statement, not everybody is called a full-time Christian service, but everybody's called to be a full-time Christian.
Yeah.
But it's a very true statement. We all as believers are called to live a life of holiness, of righteousness, and we're called to serve the local church. We're called to serve each other. We're called to love others. We're called to worship the Lord. And so, one of the most important things that we can do as a young person is to fall in love with God and the things of
Mm,
God. And as we fall in love with the things of God, it's at that time when we're growing closest to Him that His will or our purpose for our life becomes more and more clear, because God speaks to us, and sometimes He doesn't tell us everything up front. For me, He told me at a pretty early age what I was supposed to do.
mm,
Some people aren't told, some people, God doesn't reveal it to them till later in life. But we're never going to know what that is or what that next step is in our life unless we're walking with the Lord, unless we're close, unless we're in His Word, unless we're around we're around that godly counsel, unless we're serving Him. All of those things go together. So it's a commandment for us really to serve and to love each other, be involved in the church, but also just from a personal standpoint, wanting to know what is it that God would have for me. That's why it's so essential that we're walking with God each and every step. And like you said, it could be that you end up just being a local businessman, or you might be a woman in your own business, or you work at a corporate office, but you're still going to have church. You're
yeah.
still going to have the body of Christ. You're still going to have the Christian life. And if you don't develop those habits when you're young, it's going to make it 10 times harder when you're an adult. So learn it when it's easier to do it.
Yep.
Right now, a lot of young people, they have their parents that are taking them. They have those people that are pushing them, and learn to fall in love with that, because life is going to hit, and life hits like a load of bricks, and everything is going to come at you, and it's very difficult in those moments to trust God if you haven't been living that way.
Yeah.
So we got to develop those strong spiritual habits.
Okay, so you develop those in the high school years, and then you move on
Mhm.
to college or uni
Yeah.
in Australia. What's your
uh
decision there? Where do you go? What's
yeah.
your plan?
Yeah. So part of that was me trying to figure out, okay, is this what I'm supposed to do?
Mm,
Um, and so once it got to a point, I was actually in a speech class at a college, and I was supposed to do a short like Sunday school lesson or something to that effect. And it's just like you said, every night I was thinking about, what am I actually supposed to do?
mm.
And so I kind of made a bet with God, and it never goes well, but I made a bet with Him. I said, I said, all right, if I preach this little Sunday school thing, and everybody tells me how amazing it was, and blah blah, then I'll go. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. So I purposely didn't study. I made it up as I'm walking up the steps to class.
Wow.
It's just
Okay.
totally winging it.
Yeah.
Trying to make it, not because I didn't want to do that, and just had the worst message I thought I'd ever preached in my life. And afterwards, I was like, "Why aren't you studying for ministry? You should be a pastor." I was like, "Bro, I tried to butcher this," and so it was at that point where I knew I was okay. I was supposed to be. I need to get into Bible college, and to purposely study His Word. And so at that point, did have a few friends that had gone to West Coast
Mhm.
out in California, and they were all studying for ministry. And so I knew that they had some good teachers, and I knew I had some friends who would be a good influence on me, and were studying to do the same thing and make it easier for me on that commitment. So that is really, those were the some of the foundational reasons. And I know that's where my dad had originally told me I should go and I should do. So like all those kind of things kind of plugged in. So I said, okay, I should just go here. And I'm glad I did. I went there for a couple of years, and then some ministry opportunities started to present themselves. So decided to finish up everything at Veritas.
Nice.
So the online college, where I went through that.
I'm
But the
there at the
bulk of
moment.
my education, I'm sorry.
I'm there at the moment. Yeah. So
Oh, nice.
I'm
Yeah,
loving it.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a good education for sure. And yeah, so the bulk of it started at West Coast, and then the remainder of it at Veritas. Mhm.
Okay. And it's a it's a weird thing being in college because there's so much that you're doing, but there's also so much that you're preparing for. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So how does that transition work? How does that transition work from college into ministry? You said some ministry
Mm.
opportunities came up, so I guess
Yeah.
that made it a little bit easier to move on from college. Um,
Yeah.
but how's that transition work out?
Yes, it's a weird transition because when you're in college, whether it's for ministry or it's for a secular field, or, whatever it's you're studying, you go to college and you get this big head, and you think
Yeah,
about everything that you've just learned. And okay, I know my doctrines, I know how to properly prep a sermon, I know all these different things. And then you go into ministry, and 90% of the stuff that you need to know, you never learned in college. You didn't learn how
100%.
to deal with those situations with those teenagers. You didn't know how to get a crash course on how to deal with angry parents. You didn't
Yeah,
get a crash course on that. There's all these things that you learn. So it's very humbling, for sure, coming out of college. Uh, but it's but those same principles that you learned in college, and those things you're studying, are helpful. There's a lot of the educational that you'll see it starts to play itself out. But as far as practically speaking, just going into that, I think it just you have to come in through a lens of humility,
mm,
because whether you want to or not, you're going to be humbled very quickly, because you're going to run into those situations. Uh, but that's not to say that ministry is a bad thing. It's an awesome thing. If that's what God has called you to do, it's the greatest thing in the world. And so it's one of those things that you're coming out of college, and you just got to understand that I am still learning. I'm a lifelong learner. And, but at the end of the day, you go home and you think, man, this is what I've been training my whole life for, however many years for. This is
yeah,
what I get to do. So it doesn't even feel like a job. Some days it might feel a little bit more like a job, but
yeah.
for the most part, it's a blast.
It's awesome. Ministry is really a double-edged sword because you
It
have
is.
those days where you're just like, what am I doing? What's going on? It's
Hmm.
so thankless. But then there's
Yeah.
other days where you're sitting down just looking at what you're preparing for that week, and it's like, how is this work?
Hmm.
This is
Yeah.
awesome. I always say two things. I always say ministry is the ultimate humbler, and
Hmm.
the more I learn at Bible college, the more I realize I know nothing. And I think those two attitudes in those two fields are so important to have, because I think humility is the first thing to go in
Sure.
ministry and in Bible knowledge and study. Is as soon as you lose that humility, because it's so easy to do, it's so easy to just say, I know what I'm doing, or I know what I'm talking about. I know more than you. But the
Yeah.
moment you lose that humility, I think everything else just starts crashing down. And
Yeah.
it's probably the most important character trait to have while in ministry. Do you
Yeah.
agree? Do you disagree with that?
No, I totally agree. I think if you don't have a spirit of humility, not even just from a standpoint of working with others, but even just your own spiritual life, if you can't learn to be humble enough to understand when God is trying to teach you something, or God is trying to change something in your life, you'll never be what God wants you to be if you're not humble.
Mhm.
And then you'll never be effective in your ministry if you can't learn from your mistakes, learn from other people. So I think humility is huge, and that's why the Bible says, knowledge puffeth up.
Yeah.
Is so it's like we're in college, and everything is based off of our retention or our knowledge about the subject, which I understand that testing, but it's that temptation of leaving it just as knowledge and not applying it as wisdom.
Mm.
And so that's when we go into the actual ministry. That's when, okay, am I going to take this knowledge? I'm just going to let it puff me up in terms of how much better I am than everybody, or am I going to use that and apply it and turn it into wisdom and to deal with my situations?
And so, what's your intro to ministry after college? What are you starting off doing? What's your plan, I guess, as soon as you leave college?
Okay, gotcha. So right, I was leaving college, got into an athletic director, and that was the official title, athletic director. The everything that went into that was understanding that, okay, you're going to be heading up the athletics of the school. You're going
Mhm.
to be coaching basketball. So I was like, okay, cool. I get
Love it.
basketball. I get sports. This is going well. And they said you got to teach some PE classes. I'm like, oh, it's easy. Uh, more work than you think. But then they said you're going to also be teaching some. We have some need for some Bible classes for some of the high school boys. They need a new teacher, and there's a lot of opportunities, if you'd like, within the church in the youth group, and doing some things there. So that was the big seller for me. You know, the attention getter was you get to do sports, and then it was okay. And then also with this, there's a lot of ministry opportunities along with it, and Bible classes. So that was my first introduction to a ministry right out of coming out of college, and worked that for 2 years, so up to 2019. And then it's at that moment where we had that thought process of, okay, this Christian school is it's been great, but Christian school is not where God is going to end up having us ultimately.
Yeah.
So we felt that's at the time God was moving us from that position.
And now Desert Hills Baptist, man, you've been there for
Mhm.
not too long now, right? Just over a
No,
month or two.
let me see. Today's date is 23rd July, so I've been here exactly 1 month.
And
So
how's the
yeah,
first month, man?
it's great. It's awesome. Desert Hills unique ministry. And sometimes it's crazy. We're talking from Australia to Arizona, but every once in a while gets
Does that not
there's a little
trip you
hiccup.
out? Does that not trip you out,
It
bro?
blows my mind. I sit there at night and just contemplate how in the world does this work.
Mate, like
It's way over my head.
I
Way
realized
over my
you
head.
I realized the other day, I was just looking through my messages, whatever. I go, man, I talk to this guy on Instagram every so often, and we're talking from two different countries across the world.
Yeah.
It's 4 p.m. in your time, it's 9 a.m. my time. It's like I don't know, it blows
Right.
my mind.
It's
I'm in
it's
I'm in
unbelievable, and we get frustrated when it cuts out for like a second. We're
I
like, oh,
swear, and
come
I'm in
on.
COVID lockdown. You're loving life, walking around, living the dream. It's like,
Right.
mate, two different lives.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But
I
back to
forget
it.
where yeah. So but Desert Hills, yeah, it's a great place to be. It's exciting.
Mm,
Uh, I don't know if we caught it when before it cut out, but it's just been seeing tremendous explosive growth.
okay.
Not just from visitors, but members added, salvations, baptisms, discipleship. So it got to a point where they've just been continually adding staff.
Yeah.
So before that, pastor had really just run off of volunteers and interns. And these last 2 years, he's brought on. I'm now the fourth assistant pastor he's brought on, and we're gonna bring on another one, hopefully sometime in the near future as well. So just really hitting the ground running. A lot of opportunities. So we're loving every step of it.
That's awesome, man. It's funny because your video's just gotten back now. You were stuck in the
Yeah.
position for a bit. Um, so how do you? This is something that's always intrigued me and interested me because I've pretty much gone to the same church my entire life. How do you
Hmm.
assimilate from what you've known, family you've known, to a brand new church and still feeling like, wow, this is family. This is where God's put me.
Yeah, it's I think the first step is just knowing that's where God wants you.
Hmm.
And sometimes we overcomplicate things, and we overcomplicate the will of God and
Yeah.
the mystery of it. But like I was referring to before, just it's imperative that you continually stay close to God. Yeah, so staying through your personal study, time in His Word and prayer, through church. I think a big thing as well that a lot of people are afraid to look at is having a multitude of counselors. And the Bible says a multitude of counselors, there's safety. And I think a lot of people, they're almost scared to see what God would actually have, or scared to see what people would say.
Yep.
And sometimes we get trapped in just wanting yes people. Um, but surrounding yourselves with family, friends, and other people you know that be willing to tell you no, be willing to tell you the hard things. So I have close family that's part of my mentorship. I have people in my past. I have people that I kind of know, that I know are good leaders, other pastors, and I know would give me sage advice and unbiased advice. And so through those avenues, as God is showing things in my life and affirming it through counsel and through His Word, I start to move forward, and then God starts to open doors. And then, if God is calling you to a ministry, God's going to make that clear in their hearts and minds as well. And so all of that just together just made it very clear. And when you're where God wants you to be, it's the safest place you can be. God gives you an overwhelming sense of peace and comfort. So that was number one, the biggest thing. It's
Yeah.
just that peace and confidence and the assurance rather, that this is where God would have us. And I think beyond that, it's just some of it is with the job, some of it I have to do.
Yeah.
But it's just showing yourself friendly. Man that hath friends to show himself friendly. So uh, it could be a little nerve wracking at times going into a new place. But if you just have that mentality that I'm here to be your friend, I'm here to serve you, I'm here to love you, I'm here to get to know you, then you'll see very quickly that you'll see that friendship received and shown back to you. So just some days are kind of wild, a lot of guessing people's names and asking for people's names again, but it's been a blast to get acclimated to. But it just all comes back to this is where God has us.
And Christianity is so different because you walk into a church you've never walked into before, and you feel like you know people anyway.
Yeah,
Because you
right.
share that bond. It's so
Yeah,
weird. I
that
remember,
fellowship in Christ.
yeah, man. I mean, when you guys came down to Sydney, we felt that straight away with you and Cass. And then when I went to the States and went to a couple of conferences there, I was like, man, it feels like I know these people. You know what I mean? It's a weird one.
Yeah.
How's the wife deal with the move as well? Like, how'd she go with taking on the new church? Same as you?
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of similar. Yeah. So it's amazing how God works in your life when He wants you to do something.
Mm.
So when we had put out we had put out a couple times different feelers to people about like what we're looking for, what we want to do, and then we put out another, more so a blast to a bunch of people like, hey, we're really looking for a place. And Desert Hills was one of those first churches that reached out, and we just kind of look at websites and looking at areas and stuff. And Desert Hills was like one of those. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I like this church. And my wife comes to me and she says, like, so I want you to rank like the churches. And I
Okay.
said, I don't know anything about these churches. He's like, what's just like, just look at their sites and stuff. Something like, what's your top five? I was like, I don't know. So I just kind of threw a list together. And she's like, you don't have Desert Hills as number one? And I said,
Wow.
no, it's in my top three. And she was like, no, I could just totally see us being here. And it was from moment one that God already was dealing in her heart. This is a place, and her family is, close, very close knit, more so, even more than my family. And knowing that God was already giving her that peace about moving away or being where God would have us. So that's another thing that just gives you that confidence. If God is calling your family to do something, He's
Yeah.
not just going to do that in your life. He's also going to do your spouse's life. And so for moment one, she was on board with it. She's obsessed with the area, everything there is to do, the church. And so it's been an awesome journey. That's not to say that it's been some bittersweet moments, about being away from
Of
family
course.
and such. Um, but it's been cool to see how God has done that work of grace in her life about being away and starting that new chapter with her family.
I think that's, if not the most important part about choosing your ministry and choosing where you're going to go. I think you see it way too many times when there's a pastor or there's a missionary who believes God's called him to a certain place, but the rest of his family is not on board. And
Yeah,
it's very obvious when you see that, and it's, I think, very dangerous when that
it
happens,
is. Hmm.
because like your family is your first ministry, and to see that break apart within the first couple of weeks because you've wanted to move but they didn't,
Yeah,
and they're left in a very tough situation because they're believing that, you know, we're in God's will at the moment, so I'm meant to be happy about this but I'm not. And so they start questioning themselves a lot. They start doubting their faith. They start doubting their own relationship with God just because it wasn't checked with them, you know,
mm,
and it wasn't, the prayer process wasn't done with them, and it wasn't a
sure.
family decision. It was more, dad said we're doing this, so we're just going to go.
Yeah.
And
No, I think that's so true. That's such a good point, and I've seen a lot of that almost that dogmatic. Well, I'm the man of the house. This is my decision. We're going, and
mm,
it's your responsibility to go with me. And yes, God gave the man the role of leadership within the household, but He gave the spouse because it was the helpmeet, and it's not the man's job just to lord over and beat his wife over the head with this is what we're going to do and just
mm,
deal with it. It's for them to be together. It's for them to work through things together, and like you said, in the prayer process of it all, your spouse needs to be included in the counsel. Your wife should be your biggest counselor, your biggest confidant. Um, because if God is going to move your family, He's going to prepare your family.
yeah,
And there was even a church before that I was like, wow, this is an awesome church. I'd love to go there. But God wasn't doing the same thing in my wife's heart. And He
mm,
was telling her, no, 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 no. See, and I was caught up in, whoa, look at the opportunity. But I kind of took a step back and said, okay, well, this is really where God has us. Then why isn't He telling my wife the same thing? And we
wow,
went through some other things, and then through other counsel, I've learned that okay, this is not what we're supposed to do.
yeah, wow,
And so sometimes, as a guy, I don't necessarily think of everything, and
yeah,
so I just like, concentrate on one cool thing or one cool aspect about it, and say, ah, let's go. But God has given you that partner, and God has given you that person in your life, and they're also the one that balances you out. And so, if God is not doing that work in both of your lives, um, then you got to stop for a moment and say, okay, something's off here. And so now let's go back and let's work through this. Um, but your family truly is, like you said, your first ministry, and that's paramount. And so you have to make sure that if you're going to make a move, especially across the country away from family,
yeah,
you better be sure that God has done this work in both your lives. If not, it's better to stay back, don't go, make sure your family that you're called to is taken care of, and then let God work out the details. But stick to your family. Don't tear your family apart for ministry.
yeah.
So. But I appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, he definitely doesn't want us tearing our families apart for ministry. That's not God's
No.
plan. Especially when you have a newborn, man. I mean, or
Uh-huh.
a 12-month-old. Or how old is she now?
Yeah, she just turned one
Wow.
2 weeks ago. Yeah, time is flying. She's
As
already just walking around the house and just getting into
she's
all
causing
sorts of
trouble.
trouble.
Yeah, nice.
Yep, all sorts of trouble. She's like a
Listen,
mom.
she wouldn't be doing her job if she wasn't causing you guys trouble. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, she's doing
Breaking
her.
things, this, that. Um,
She's carrying her load.
but that's even harder, man, to move away from family and to move across country with a new kid.
Mhm.
How do you deal with that pressure? Because that's something that I
Yeah.
won't need to know about for a long time, but it's still
Yeah.
such a huge decision. Like, there's no more support network of the family being around to help.
Yeah.
How's that
It's
pressure?
a, it's It's definitely an added pressure, especially with my wife's family. Not that they're trying to be extra pressure, but it is the first grandchild on that
Yeah, yeah.
side.
Oh,
So my
wow. Okay.
parents, yeah, so my
That's
parents
huge.
have three grandchildren now, the Cammy, and then a fifth on the way. So they already have some grandkids away. So, there was hopes that we'd stay in the area, but they had already mentally prepared themselves more
It's
so.
no longer new to
And
them, the whole
yeah,
grandchild
it's
thing. Yeah.
it's not new. Yeah, so I think some of it is setting up some realistic expectations and having some clear conversations ahead of time.
Hmm.
When we started the conversation of, hey, we're going to launch away from Christian school and we're looking for a pastoral position, we told them, hey, as much as we'd love to be around you guys, uh, we are just going to go where God calls us. And
Mm.
so we understand sometimes God calls us to do things that aren't necessarily that comfortable, that would be out of our comfort zone. Now, one of our prayers was, God, if you'd let us, we'd love to be near family. That'd be awesome. That would be great. But ultimately, we need to, make sure that our family and our daughter is where God wants her to be.
Yeah, well.
And so, and the other thing is to, with grandparents, they'll find a way to see their grandchildren. You can't keep them from them. So they already came out and visited for 1 year. And then on top of that is just making sure you do plan time for family, though.
Yeah.
With being so far away, it can be tough. And so we've already started to schedule out, Cassie going back to see them, and Christmas time we'll see them, then they'll come out. And so it's setting up those realistic expectations, but also informing them that, hey, we're not leaving to get away from you. We're leaving to go do God's will, and we're still going to see you. And so setting those things up, having those tough conversations ahead of time. And they've been great, on both sides. They understand. They're happy for us because they know that we're doing what God wants us to.
Well, bro, it really does sound like you did your prep work, and that's always missed, or it's just rarely thought about. That prep work's so important, and sounds like you did it perfectly, man. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
it
really cool.
definitely it definitely helped. It's still those tough moments of this. There's still a lot of tears that were shed,
Mhm.
things like that. But it all goes back to when you follow God and you're committed to His will. God won't just work in your life; He'll work in other people's lives as well.
Yeah.
There's other people that are important to the situation. So He'll deal not in just my life, my wife's life. He'll deal not in just our lives, but Desert Hill's lives. He'll deal not just in our lives, but our parents' lives. And so it's that overwhelming peace of God, and that happiness of following the will of God. And God will give everybody the grace that they need in the situation as His kingdom is furthered.
Yeah, well. And Desert Hills, let's finish it off
Mm.
with the
Yeah.
church there, man. The church is, like you said, growing. I got to take a look at the Facebook page, see what they're doing there. It looks like a lot of great
Yeah.
stuff. Um,
Uh-huh.
so what are you doing? You're doing evangelism. You're the pastor of evangelism. And so what's your daily routine like? What are you doing there? What's your process?
Yeah, so some of it's still getting a little bit acclimated. Some of it is a little bit of onboarding and meeting with the other pastors and assistants and seeing what they've been doing. And so we're about to launch into our staff retreat here in a couple weeks, where we're laying out the whole 2022 calendar, setting
Nice.
everything in place. So a lot of planning right now. Typical week though, Mondays, turning, setting the schedule for the week, then going to do some type of outreach on Mondays. Right now in the summers, we take a break as a team because it's about 118 degrees out on a lot of days in
So
the
very hot.
Arizona heat. So
That desert,
it's
man, they'll get you.
right. You're out there for 5 minutes and you're pouring down sweat. So
Yeah.
we figured showing up to people's houses pouring down sweat is probably not the best look.
It,
Uh,
you could do
so,
better.
uh, so right now, actually focusing on a lot of businesses, visiting businesses during this time, especially a lot of people struggling in that sense. So Mondays, as a staff, we try to outreach in some capacity to the community. And then a lot of emails, forwarding, getting things ready for Wednesday nights is the big youth night. And then every week, making intentional visits from first time guests, making visits to counseling appointments, discipleship. Those are some big things that are stressed on our staff.
Mm.
Everybody should be discipling somebody. Everybody should be involved in some type of counseling, because if we're if we're growing, if we're healthy, if we're meeting people's needs, there's always a need to discipleship. There's always a need to counsel.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly making those types of appointments. Um, some of it is sort of week to week. Sundays is a first time guest is a big concentration for myself, heading up what we call our auditorium pastors. So just identifying beyond the greeters, any first time guests, anybody who's missing, any prayer requests. So really filtering the
Awesome.
needs of the church. Then Wednesday, and then Monday to Wednesday, it's all about Wednesday. Then Thursday, it's all about prep for Sunday. And then Friday, Saturday are our days off. So Friday, we try to keep really centered on family. So everybody tries to block that off as much as we can. And then Saturdays is kind of a float day. Everybody typically ends up having something they do on Saturday, but it's not required to be in the office or anything. But sometimes we'll have discipleship meetings or a youth activity or what have you on those days. But it's been a nice adjustment, and that's also helped with the whole family aspect. Is just they also value the family, and so
Yes.
understanding that we need to make sure we're blocking those times off, because ministry gets busy for sure. It's not just a 9 to 5 job.
Yeah, definitely not.
It's many hours, but
Yeah.
it's good stuff.
Nice, man. And all right, final two questions for you.
Sure.
10 years ago, Caleb, what do you tell him?
hmm
What's the one thing you get him to push forward with?
I would say to be more focused
Okay.
on the things of God. So 10 years ago, Caleb would have been I've been 16, so I'd have been ending. I've been my sophomore year, middle of my sophomore year. Um, I think more focus intentionally on your personal walk. It's just so foundational to everything that you do. And if you don't have a set time every day, you don't schedule it out. If you don't have that, I find it just derails your day, derails
Yeah.
your week, spiritually, especially being in ministry. Sometimes you can concentrate so much on what do other people need? What do other people need? What does this next message need? What does the next message need? And then you're not taking that time for your own spiritual development. It could wear on you,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
it could struggle. But also, just from a practical standpoint, just growing in that love and that passion and being that sanctification process, and being affirmed of what it is that I'm called to, what is on purpose to. So I would say, intentionally focused on the spiritual walk. There's always something that was kind of iffy for me growing up. Was it went in seasons, and so if I wish I could go back, it would be to be consistent with that.
I think that's the hardest part about being a Christian in general is
Mm,
trying to stay consistent with that walk. It's
yeah.
so easy just to one week not do it, the next week do it, and then just go back and forth. And it's so important just to stick, you know.
hmm
Um, I mean, we're in lockdown right now, and I've told people this before. It's harder in lockdown to be in the Bible than it is when you've got a busy life running around.
uh, yeah.
Um,
It's hard to time manage when you're sitting in COVID, just sitting at home all day. It's tough, like, especially when you have a good show on. You just want
Mate,
to binge watch it,
that
and you
Netflix binge
realize
gets hit.
you don't even remember what day it is. You wake up like, I
Exactly.
thought it was Wednesday. It's already Friday. You don't even know.
That's exactly right. And now, probably the most important question I've got for you. We all
Sure.
know, me and my friends, we all know Pastor Kurt Skelly. He's a great friend of ours.
Uh-huh.
He's Pastor Skelly. Who are you? Are you Pastor Caleb? Are you Pastor Skelly? What are you going with?
It's definitely not Pastor Skelly.
Okay.
This is too weird.
Pastor Skelly's my dad.
Definitely, yeah. Pastor Skelly's my dad. I don't like the title brother, anything like that. So I just go by Pastor Caleb or Caleb, depending on who it is.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, I don't want to sound too old or that's maybe 30 years down the road I'll be Pastor Skelly, but not today, not today.
Well, I won't lie to you, man. I thought about that joke for about 3-4 days, and I thought this is going to be a great one, and it hit exactly how I thought it would. With
It was
everyone
executed perfectly.
With everyone rolling their eyes at me as they're listening to this.
That prep work paid off.
That's it. That's it. Well, mate, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Absolutely.
It was so cool to talk to you, man. It's been too long. We definitely have to do this again. But before we go, where can the people find you online? Where can they find you on social media and the church as well, so that we can follow and support them?
Yeah. So mine is just my first name, Caleb_Skelly. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. And then if you want to find the church, it's just Desert Hills Baptist Church. If you're having trouble finding it, just go under my friends who I follow. You'll pop right up. Yeah. Desert Hills Baptist Church, Pastor Adam Zamora. It's in Buckeye, Arizona. Or like I said, just sometimes it's hard sometimes looking up churches because there'll be 15 other ones that pop up. So just see who I follow and you just roll with that.
100%. Well, bro, once again, thank you so much for doing this. Ladies and gents, this is out Monday mornings. Tuesdays, we have a chat with Ray and Stat. So make sure you check that out. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Caleb, thanks for talking to me, my man.
Absolutely. Like and subscribe, guys. All right. We'll see you.